I've always considered myself a drawer at heart. In a sense, I used to always say I just color the drawings that I do. I had an instructor in anatomy, Roger McGovern, at the Philadelphia Museum School of Art. And what I remember was when he taught anatomy and drawing from the model. And what I remember was he was a paraplegic. He was in a wheelchair. And he would do something that I would probably never do today, is that he'd find himself at your drawing board or your easel, and he would sort of move you aside and he would correct over your drawing with his drawing. And I was mesmerized of what this man could do with line. And I always thought about that, how much expression, and if it wasn't for him doing that, I don't know whether I would have had the same appreciation. He was a master. And usually when I'm working on a project like The Lion and the Mouse or any of the books that I do that deal with nature, I go through the process of finding the creature in reference books. My library for nature is probably twice as large as most libraries and your local library. The tools that I use are very simple. I get almost anything I can out of a 2B pencil. And there are probably occasions where it might be a 3B. I don't think I've ever gone like a 4B or a 6B. And that's true of also the brushes that I use. Even though the large washes are usually done with a number 6. At this point, I'm not thinking really about what I'm going to do with the watercolor. I'm just focusing on the drawing. And it's interesting because you can usually see what kind of place I'm in depending on how much I develop the drawing. If my, say, personal life is a little bit rocky at the time, then I use the drawing of the subject as my sort of security blanket. It gives me a place to go. The other thing that I do is usually I'm working with an eraser in one hand. If I do something that I don't particularly feel I like, I just go in, I'll erase it, sometimes leaving the shadow of the revision behind because it allows me to, it gives a little bit of sense of being alive and keeps it a little fresher. Now, rarely do I work with on a white background. There's always a little bit of a tint, and it could be a mixture of raw umber and an ochre. Now, my work is really a matter of layers. I probably am going to use black today, but I rarely use black. If I wanted a black, I would just keep layering it, sometimes as many as 5 or 6 layers. But I mean, it's that, there's a lot of tools that you have to learn, and one of the biggest ones I found was how to do your research, because you don't ever want to get to that place where you have an idea, but you can't execute the idea because you don't know how to get the research resources that you need. So that's very intentional. I always wanted to straddle the fence between what an animal really would be doing in its natural state with what registers to us as what we think the animal is thinking. We're often asked, how long things take. And it's always misleading when I say 3 days, because I work, you know, when I'm working very intensely, they might be 10-hour days. So it's not fair if I say just, if I say 3 days and it turns out to be 30 hours or something like that. I don't worry about a light source. It depends on where I want your eye to go. And I think the fact that I don't worry too much about a light source really opens it up for me. And you believe what I have down there. You know, sometimes you make the decision whether you want the background to play a role in the image itself, or just bring more focus to whatever the subject is. And I kind of do that as I go along. And it usually always feels like I'm taking a risk when I make that decision. And when I make the decision and I start working on it, I realize it was a risk. And then you just go with it. And it's because in so many ways, you kind of want it to be a surprise. I'll tell you something. Well, part of my passion for animals, because when I grew up, we didn't treat animals very well. And I remember always this sick feeling when we used to capture, you know, fireflies and put them in bottles. And we used to do all weird kind of stuff. And as a kid, I can go right back there now to that sort of gnawing feeling that wasn't right. And then it was the zoo. As a kid, I hated the zoo. I didn't like the circus. Now, zoos were not like they are today at that time, and everything was in cages. I could remember that wildcat house where that animal paced back and forth, and just staring. And I remember as a kid, I said, I don't like this. So there's a sort of reverence for the animal life now.